Right now, at this exact moment, 34 million Revolutionary War records are sitting open and free, records that normally require a paid subscription to even view a single page. This is not a permanent change, and it is not a marketing gimmick that will quietly extend itself forever. It is a genuine window, tied directly to America's 250th birthday, and that window closes in a matter of days, at a specific published time, after which the exact same records return to a paywall with no announced date for when free access might happen again. If you have ever heard a family story about an ancestor who fought in the Revolution, even a vague one, even one nobody in your family ever bothered to confirm, even one that sounds like it might just be wishful thinking passed down at Thanksgiving dinners, this is the moment to actually go look, because the research itself costs nothing right now, and the only thing standing between you and an answer is a few minutes of your time before the clock runs out. I want to show you exactly what is in these records, because pension files are not just names and dates typed onto a government form somewhere. They are handwritten testimony given under oath, sworn affidavits from men who stood beside your ancestor in actual battle, family Bible pages torn out and filed as legal evidence over 2 centuries ago, and sometimes details about an ancestor's life that exist nowhere else on Earth except inside that single surviving file. Some of the discoveries already coming out of this exact collection in just the past few weeks are genuinely extraordinary, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what to search for and exactly how to search for it correctly before this window closes for good. Stay with me. Subscribe right now before we start. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with me. First, understand exactly what just happened and why, because the context matters for how urgently you should treat this. Fold 3, one of the major digital archives for American military records, has opened free access to its entire Revolutionary War collection, more than 34 million records in total, running through July 6th at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time. Normally, viewing these records in any real detail requires a paid membership, the same as most specialized genealogical archives. For this window, tied specifically to the semi-quincentennial, the 250th anniversary of American independence, the entire collection has been open to anyone who registers a free account, no payment information required. The centerpiece of the collection is the complete set of Revolutionary War pension files, roughly 80,000 individual files, fully digitized and, critically, fully searchable using handwriting recognition technology that has only very recently made it possible to search the actual handwritten text inside these documents word by word, rather than relying on a brief index card summary that might miss the exact detail you are looking for entirely. Second, understand what a pension file actually contains, because this is where most people badly underestimate what they are about to find when they finally open one. Pensions were not automatically granted to every veteran the moment the war ended. Initially, only soldiers who had been disabled by a wartime injury qualified for any support at all. It was not until the Pension Act of 1818, nearly 4 decades after the fighting began, that Congress expanded eligibility to veterans in what the law called reduced circumstances, meaning veterans who had fallen into poverty in their old age and genuinely needed government support simply to survive. To prove their service and qualify, veterans had to testify in open court, often decades after the war had ended, since most original discharge papers had long since been lost, destroyed, or simply thrown away by men who never imagined they would need them again. That courtroom testimony is what fills these files today: sworn affidavits describing specific battles by name, details about commanding officers, unit movements and captures, accounts from fellow soldiers who had served directly alongside them and were willing to travel to a courthouse and vouch for their service under oath, risking perjury charges if they lied. This is not a database entry summarizing a life in 2 lines. It is a surviving voice, describing in the veteran's own words, or in the sworn words of people who stood beside him in actual combat, exactly what he lived through, preserved almost perfectly for over 200 years. Third, do not overlook the widows, because their files are frequently richer and more detailed than the veteran's own file ever was. If a veteran died before pension eligibility was well established, or before he ever got around to filing his own claim, his widow could apply independently for a widow's pension. And to prove her claim, she frequently had to submit extensive documentation of her marriage, her husband's death, and often the complete names, birth dates, and current whereabouts of every one of their children, since the size and needs of the surviving family directly affected her eligibility and the size of her support. One widow's application, filed in 1838, listed 7 children, including a daughter whose existence had been completely unknown to her own modern descendants, until a researcher opened the file just this year and discovered a branch of the family tree that no living relative had ever heard of. In another remarkable case, now surfacing from this exact collection, a soldier named John Gillett's pension file contained an entire page, torn directly from his family's Bible, preserved as legal evidence of his children's birth dates, along with documentation of his widow's eventual remarriage after his death. and buried in the same file, evidence of a legal name change within the family that no other surviving record had captured. A widow's pension file can hand you an entire branch of a family tree that the veteran's own military service record would never have mentioned at all, simply because nobody had a legal reason to write it down until she needed it to prove her own claim decades later. Fourth, the most powerful research technique available in this collection right now, and it is one almost nobody outside serious genealogical circles uses correctly or even knows exists. Every single name mentioned anywhere inside a pension file has now been indexed by this new handwriting recognition technology. Not just the soldier who was actually applying for the pension himself. This means if your ancestor served as a witness in someone else's pension case, providing a sworn affidavit for a fellow soldier or a neighbor from the same county, his name and his own testimony about his own service may appear inside a completely different person's file entirely. One you would never have thought to search under his name at all, since his name was never the primary subject of that file. If a direct search for your ancestor by name comes up completely empty, do not assume no record survives. Instead, search for the county he is believed to have lived in, or the specific regiment he is believed to have served with, and read carefully through the witness testimony sections inside other veterans' files from that exact same unit or region. You may find your own ancestor's voice preserved inside a stranger's paperwork, describing the exact same battles and the exact same events from his own first-hand perspective, sworn under oath in a courtroom 2 centuries ago, simply because he happened to be standing next to someone else who needed his help proving a claim. Subscribe right now because the next 4 points cover the specific overlooked record types most researchers skip entirely, a true story just uncovered inside this exact collection about a formerly enslaved soldier who documented his own African-born mother's name in his sworn pension testimony, and the exact search strategy to use if your ancestor's surname has ever been spelled more than one way across different records. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with me. Fifth, do not stop at the pension files, because the free access window covers several other record types that most casual searchers skip entirely, often missing significant pieces of a family's story as a result. Revolutionary War Service records contain compiled card abstracts for regular Continental Army soldiers, as well as militia and volunteer forces, organized by state and then alphabetically by surname, giving you a second, independent way to confirm a service record, even if no pension file survives for that particular individual, or even if he died before ever needing to file one. Revolutionary War rolls document the muster rolls, pay lists, and unit rosters that tracked exactly which men were serving in which units at any given time throughout the war, useful for confirming a soldier's location and unit even between major documented battles. A newer edition, the Revolutionary War Burial Index, now includes more than 67,000 records for veterans who died between 1775 and 1875, giving you a starting point even when you only know roughly where an ancestor is buried, rather than his full service history. And buried in these broader records is one of the more remarkable individual stories to surface recently, that of a soldier named John Stahl, who testified at the astonishing age of 105 that he had originally been a Hessian soldier, hired by the British to fight against the American colonists, before eventually switching sides entirely, joining George Washington's own ranks and camping alongside him on the banks of the Delaware River. Stahl went on to fight at Brandywine in Germantown and was personally discharged from service by General Washington himself, a detail preserved only because Stahl lived long enough and was asked the right questions decades later to have his own extraordinary account recorded for a pension file. Most researchers would never think to search for a former enemy soldier. Sixth, one of the most remarkable individual discoveries to surface from this exact collection involves a soldier named Primus Ting, whose pension file provides something almost never found preserved in Revolutionary War era records for a formerly enslaved American, a direct, named personal connection to a specific place in Africa. Ting's sworn testimony documents that he fought at the Battle of Monmouth and personally witnessed the surrender of British General Burgoyne, details significant enough on their own for any Revolutionary War veteran's file. But the detail that makes his file truly extraordinary is this. He recorded his own mother's name in his sworn testimony, Ancilia Crowningshield, and specifically noted that she was, in his own recorded words, a native of Guinea in Africa. For a formerly enslaved man living in early America, having his mother's actual name and her specific African birthplace preserved permanently in an official federal government document, in his own sworn words, rather than a slaveholder's ledger or a bill of sale, is exceptionally rare in the surviving historical record from this period. It exists today specifically because Primus Ting chose to include it in his pension testimony almost 2 centuries ago, sitting quietly unread in this exact archive for generations, until handwriting recognition technology finally made it searchable by keyword for the very first time this year. Seventh, If your family surname has ever been spelled more than one way in different historical records, and for most families with any colonial-era ancestry at all, it has, use browse mode rather than direct search first when your initial attempt comes up empty. Select the state where your ancestor is believed to have enlisted, then filter by the first letter of the surname and browse through the results directly, rather than relying entirely on a single spelled-out search query that might miss a variant spelling entirely and convince you the file simply does not exist. 18th and early 19th century record keepers spelled names phonetically far more often than consistently, sometimes spelling the exact same surname 3 or 4 different ways across a single file, and a single missed letter in your search query can be the difference between finding your ancestor's file and concluding, incorrectly, that no record survives for him at all. And when you do find a file, read the full testimony rather than skimming for names and dates alone, since the human detail is often where the real history lives. One veteran, named Francis Duclos, gave testimony in 1821, describing being wounded twice in combat and left for dead on the field, before eventually applying for a pension under the newly expanded 1818 law, and listing his entire remaining estate. Everything he owned in the world after risking his life for a new nation is nothing more than some old furniture, a hog, and a cow. 7 points and 1 closing window. 34 million records, opened specifically because of a single once-in-a-lifetime anniversary, closing at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time on July 6th, with no announced date for the next time this happens. The pension files that contain sworn courtroom testimony, rather than simple index entries, filled with the actual voices of men describing what they lived through. The widow's applications that frequently contain more family detail, more names, more buried branches of a family tree than the veteran's own file ever will. The witness testimony buried inside other people's paperwork, where your own ancestor's voice might be hiding under a name you never thought to search, simply because he once stood up in a courtroom to help a neighbor. The service records, the muster rolls, and the burial index, each one a different door into the same underlying history, useful even when a pension file never existed at all. The story of a formerly enslaved soldier who made sure his mother's name and her African birthplace survived in a federal record for over 2 centuries, unread until this exact moment. The Hessian soldier who switched sides and camped with George Washington himself, and the simple, practical fix for surname spelling that has stopped more genealogical searches cold and convinced more researchers a record simply does not exist than almost any other single mistake in this entire field. If you have any reason at all to believe you might have Revolutionary War ancestry, even a family story that has never been confirmed by anyone, even a surname that only sounds vaguely right, this is the moment to actually look, because the research roadmap already exists and does not require you to build it from scratch on your own. The Daughters of the American Revolution and the Sons of the American Revolution both maintain free, searchable databases specifically built around proven Revolutionary War patriots and their fully documented descendants. And because both organizations require rigorous, cited documentation for every single membership application submitted, searching their systems first can save you months of independent research that someone else may have already completed. If a distant cousin has already proven a lineage back to a specific Patriot ancestor, their documented sources become your starting point, already verified and ready to build from, rather than a blank page and a guess. To be eligible for either organization, a proven ancestor needed either direct military service or what is formally called patriotic service, a category broad enough to include paying taxes to a revolutionary government or providing civilian aid to the cause, meaning your qualifying ancestor did not necessarily have to carry a rifle to count. Fold 3's free access to the full Revolutionary War collection runs through July 6th at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time. Registration required, but completely free for the entire duration of the window. After that, the exact same 34 million records return to a paid membership, and the window closes until the next time an anniversary this significant comes around again, which will not be within any of our lifetimes. Subscribe right now if this video convinced you to go search before the window closes for good. Every week on this channel, we go this deep into the real histories waiting inside the records most people never think to open, let alone search correctly. Subscribe, like this video, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment below. Did your family always say there was a Revolutionary War ancestor somewhere in the tree, a story nobody ever quite got around to confirming? Did you search this week while the records were free, and what did you find in there? Tell me the surname and the state where you believe he served, and whether you found him under his own name or hiding inside somebody else's file as a witness. This is where the real conversations happen on this channel. Share this with every family that has a Revolutionary War story nobody ever actually confirmed, because the records are free right now, and in a matter of days, they will not be, possibly for years, possibly for longer than that.